I'm really thrilled to see so many of you here today. And before I start the training, and we're going to talk about what are talent acquisition teams doing different, the really top talent acquisition teams, I want to give you just a little bit of a background because normally I split my speaking engagements between speaking to, corporate audiences where I've got, the C-suite, and I go to CEO conferences, then I speak at some HR events and also staffing and recruiting events. What I've learned over the years, and I do believe this, is that anybody involved in human resource, involved in talent acquisition, you really play such an important role. And I'm always saying this, I just got back from a CEO conference, and I always position talent acquisition and HR people as the heart of the company, because a company cannot achieve their goals and objectives if they do not have the right people in place. And, HR is just not about filling roles. I mean, it's so much more important than that. And again, the decisions you make and everything that you do every day, you understand that human side of acquisition, which is critical for success, and long-term value. And I believe that retention and engagement, all of that starts with the absolute, the sourcing and recruiting process, and it's your hiring process. And so it's interesting because I do some training in-house, and I've spent some time in some organizations that are really top-notch. And that's why I wanted to share some of the things I've learned over the past year with you. And again, whether you're part of a small HR team or lead a large-scale talent acquisition function, I think the one thing that we're all learning, and we're learning very quickly, is that what used to work in the past just isn't working anymore. So much has changed. And it's not, it's like post-COVID, it's a different world. Not to say that a lot of these changes wouldn't happen, down the road, but it caused things to happen much quicker. And candidates, really top talent, they have many more choices. Internal hiring managers have extremely high expectations, and everyone from leadership to new hires, everybody wants faster results. And again, I think it's important that you and I slow down a moment. And I never thought those words would come out of my mouth, but I think that everybody is under such pressure these days, and there's so much uncertainty out there that too often, when we come in, we just feel like hamsters on a wheel, trying to fill requisitions as fast as you can with the best talent, but having everybody wanting their requisition to have, your priority be your top priority of the day. So what I'm going to try to do in the next 30 minutes, I'm just going to walk you through what some of those top performing talent acquisition teams are doing differently this year to give them better results. And I'm not going to dwell a lot on problems. What I'm going to focus on is what needs to change, not just to stay competitive, but to become a true hiring partner inside your organization. And so that all of you know, every time I'm at a CEO conference, I'm in front of leadership. In fact, I was hired recently to go to Alexandria, Virginia, to teach a talent acquisition team how to attract better talent. And when I actually spent some time with the talent acquisition team, they were phenomenal. And in the first 3 hours I was there, I realized it wasn't the talent acquisition team. It was the hiring process. It was people involved in the hiring process, and again, so often people say, well, we partner, HR is our partner, but often you don't have a seat at the table, which is so critically important that you not only have a seat at the table, but that you're involved in major decision making. So let's start out with what's broken, okay, and the things that I'm hearing constantly from leadership. Time to fill is too long. Everybody thinks it takes too long to fill positions. Excuse me. The quality of hires are inconsistent. Candidate engagement drops off, after the first conversation. Meanwhile, hiring managers are becoming more frustrated. And here's the hard truth. In many cases, talent acquisition is viewed more as an order taker than a strategic contributor or a partner. And that perception doesn't change with good intentions or harder work. It changes with a shift in mindset, a shift in tools, and a shift in approach. And so that all of you know, I'm your biggest advocate. Every time I have leaders in front of me, I am always talking about the importance of aligning, the importance of you having a seat at the table, the importance of realizing that you don't just fill acquisitions. All of you are workplace experts. You're out there talking to candidates daily. You're out there talking to your hiring managers daily. You're hearing what's going on firsthand. And so I just want to go through a few things that I feel, can really impact, what you're doing every day and, help you become one of the most effective talent acquisition teams out there. First of all is alignment, which is so important. Top teams aren't starting searches until they have absolute clarity on what success looks like in a role. And that goes far beyond job searches and job descriptions. It's so interesting because, whenever, and I've done some in-house training for some very large organizations, and I pull out requisitions and they haven't been updated in 5 years. They're having different conversations with hiring managers and not asking what do you want, but what does the person in this role need to accomplish in their first 3 to 6 and 12 months. If you are not including performance objectives, if you're not obtaining those from your hiring managers, this is a game changer because the kind of performance-based conversation changes everything from your sourcing to interviewing and how offers are extended. And so you really want to start, spending time. And if somebody says, I want somebody like the last person, that's not true. And if somebody's been in a job longer than a year, you and I both know that the requisition that you used to fill that job a year ago or 2 years ago is not going to work right now because any hiring manager out there, any supervisor is going to use the talents of the people they hire. So maybe you've got this list of what was required when this person was hired, but then this person's talents, surfaced, and too often you're given a requisition that's a year old, 2 years old, 3 years old, and it doesn't even list the qualifications that their direct report really wants to have in place. And so one of the first things I would suggest, and again, anytime I'm doing consulting for a company, I love when we're talking to a hiring manager and I will ask, can you give me 5 performance objectives? And they go, what do you mean 5 performance objectives? Can you give me what needs to be there? What does this person have to accomplish in 6 months or a year for you to come back to me and say, wow, best hire I've made in months. This person is just excelling at everything that we need them to do. Because let me tell you what happens when you ask for performance objectives. First of all, often hiring managers they're not even aware of what you're looking for. So you have to be very specific. I would love to know what this person has to accomplish in 3, 6, and 12 months to get an outstanding review from you, for you to come back and say, great hire. What do they need to do? What you're going to find is so often that long laundry list of skills that are on the requisition form that they've asked you for, you can probably eliminate 50% of it. I just recently talked to an individual that was hiring a VP level individual, and they had given us 14 things that they were requiring of this high level individual. And once I asked them for performance objectives, first of all, what's going to be surprising is sometimes when you ask the question, the answer will be, I don't know. And I go, well, if you want this person to become engaged and retained, because everyone is facing turnover problems, everyone is facing a lack of engagement. I'm hearing that over and over again. And the new trend that started probably 18 months ago was you hire somebody new and they're on the job a week, 2 weeks, a month, 3 months, and all of a sudden one day they go to lunch and they don't come back. And they don't call you and they don't call anybody. It's like they disappeared off the face of the earth. Because something that's happening right now is individuals are accepting a job. And if they don't like the job, often they keep interviewing even though they've accepted a job through you. They've been onboarded by you. You've invested in them. You've trained them. You've onboarded them. They're finally going to start giving you a return on your investment of time and money in them. And then they just walk off the job. And so that's why performance objectives are so critically important, because what you do is you ask your hiring managers to share them, and then you share those with the job seeker, with the candidate. And I can tell you that it's painful because we've gone to hire individuals that we think are perfect. And then when we share the performance objectives, it just happened a couple of days ago, we were sharing performance objectives with someone. And her first response was, I don't want to be. Why would I be evaluated on that area? I'm above that. That tells me they don't appreciate who I am. And I don't want to be evaluated on that. Okay, so we went back to the hiring manager and said, we've got an outstanding candidate from you, but this one area that you want to evaluate them on, she feels is beneath her. That she will not be interested in the job if in fact that's an area that you deem important enough to be one of your performance objectives. And the hiring manager dug their heels in and said, no, that's an area that we absolutely will not change. Now, if we didn't have that, the person loved the job, loved the company, they may have taken it. And the minute they realized they were being evaluated in an area that they felt was beneath them, they'd start conducting a job search. And you and I both know candidates are more networked than they've ever been in history. And also, when they leave a company, their past employer, often counteroffers are not coming out in the first 2 weeks after they handed notice. They're coming a month later, 2 months later, 3 months later, when either the company couldn't replace them or they replaced them and the replacement didn't work out. And that's why your follow-up process after onboarding and the agreement of everybody that's going to be interacting with this candidate of what they need to do to really do well with you, to advance within your company. That is so critically important. And so if you're not doing that, if you do nothing else that I'm teaching you today, I can tell you all the best companies that I'm currently working with are all getting performance objectives on every position they're filling, and they're sharing the performance objectives with candidates before they even arrange for the first interview. They want to know that this person is fine with being evaluated in these areas. Secondly is personalization. It's so funny because I do calls for job seekers once a week and I do them anonymously. They don't know who I am. I have these career portals, and so I have usually 900 to 1,000 people, sometimes more, on these calls every week. And all I'm doing is I'm giving them training on how to advance in their career every week. And then I open the lines for questions and answer. And they complain about recruiters and talent acquisition people all the time, that we don't care about them. All we care about is filling a job. And by the way, that is the perception out there that is hurting both you and me and everybody involved in our profession. Candidates don't feel that we care about them. They feel all we care about is filling a job. And so we have to really focus every conversation we have on how we can benefit the people that we're representing, because candidates do feel like a number. And even if you posted a job, and they answered a job posting, it's really good when I talk to you about slow down your interviewing process and don't go right into pitching the job. Even if you've advertised a job or you reached out an email on LinkedIn and they responded, refrain from thinking about the job in your initial conversations and focus more on what this person wants to do next. You've got to personalize this experience that the candidate is having. They might say, well, tell me about the job. Well, before I tell you about the job, what I really want to learn is what's most important to you. What do you see as your next career move? So often you and I are afraid to personalize the conversation. We're afraid to do a general interview because we want to fill a rec. But how many times have you been refilling recs because the candidates turn over in certain jobs? And that's why once you have the performance objectives, you know what's important to the hiring manager. Now, when you're interviewing, you have to personalize the interviewing experience and conduct a general interview. Quality over quantity in communication is essential, because every interaction you have with them, they have to find it intentional and meaningful, not that you're just trying to fill a job. And again, AI, I'm quizzed all the time. In fact, I've done 19 courses now for LinkedIn Learning on all different types of topics. And I just was in California taping 2 new courses on the impact of AI on recruiting and talent acquisition and hiring and that type of thing. And many of my courses are approved for like SHRM certification. So, I try to keep on top of everything as much as I possibly can. But AI is not going to replace you. What it's doing is it is automating routine tasks. It's helping you, if you're not using simple, even free AI tools to learn how to communicate better when you're talking to your candidates. You could put a candidate's resume in an AI tool and let them know what the priorities are of this person and how should you be communicating back. I mean, it can help you with all your routine tasks, but you and I have the ability to see past a resume or CV to see past what a person is saying to us. Whether you're doing virtual interviews where you've got somebody on screen, I do like to see someone when I'm interviewing them. If it's a virtual interview, I want to see their body language. I can learn so much more when I can actually personalize the experience. But if they feel like you are mass mailing things, if they're just part of this massive interviewing process, and you never ask them what's important to them first, you're going to have less offers accepted. And when I say you've got to be intentional and meaningful, your intention when you're talking to candidates has to be about focusing on what is important to them. Because everybody that we're talking to, whether you're talking to a hiring manager or you're talking to a candidate, they have a tattoo on their forehead, and their tattoo is WIIFM, what's in it for me? People just want to know if they're going to benefit by what you're saying or what you're doing for them. And if you're just pitching at somebody and you're focused on a job you're trying to fill, the candidate feels, again, like all you care about is filling a job. And so slow it down. Do not pitch a job. Do not talk about a specific job until you ask this person, what do you see as your next career move? What has to be there for you to make a change today? If you could change 5 things about your current job if you were your boss, what would you change? You've got to ask that question, because quite frankly, people are not just changing jobs because they want to advance and make more money. They're changing jobs because something is going on at their current place of employment that they have no control over. Something is going on that they can't change. And that's why they're talking to you. And if the only reason they give you for changing a job is money and advancement, they're going to use your offer to get a counteroffer. You've got to dig deeper. If you were your boss, what would you change to make your current job more desirable? What's missing? What must be there for you to make a change today? Give me a reason why I should hire you over someone else. Do they really know about your company and about your job? Delve into their accomplishments, and not only asking accomplishment, but what impact have your accomplishments had on your past employer? Because a person's past is a nice window into their future. But again, you've also got to uncover, what do they want to learn? It was interesting because one of our hiring managers interviewed a peak performer. And also, do you have a hiring process for peak performers and then your normal hiring process? And you understand what I'm saying. I was just talking about this at a CEO conference recently, and I had people, stand up and go, Barbara, you can't have 2 hiring processes. And I go, if you don't, you're going to lose out on the best talent, because the best talent is on the market and off the market in a matter of days or weeks, not months, and even at higher levels. And you and I know when we have somebody sitting in front of us that we should hire. But how many times does timing ruin it? Where you've spent your time sourcing and interviewing and presenting, and then there's timing problems. And one thing I would like to share with all of you that really has been a game changer for some of my clients is I've told them to start getting a target date to fill and get interviewing times the day they take the requisition. Because how many times have you surfaced somebody outstanding and then nobody's available to interview? And I can tell you, the timing is killing all of us. And sometimes hiring managers, they want to wait for that perfect person, where if you surface one of those high achievers, they've got to do a panel interview. They've got to get that person in front of, instead of 1, 2, 3, 4 interviews, you've got to do a panel interview and fast pace certain people. Now, you're not going to do that all the time, but when you get that rock star in front of you that is not going to be on the market long, you have to personalize their experience with you. You've got to combine automation efficiency with human connection. And again, a hiring manager is never going to do this if they're viewing you as somebody that strictly fills requisitions. You've got to show them why they benefit by really spending time with you during your intake session, why it benefits them to give you performance objectives. They have to understand why sharing what their goals are with you helps you do a better job for them. When you think about it, who do your hiring managers talk to? Who's their sounding board? because organizations are leaner than they've ever been, and there's not a lot of levels of management in most companies. And your hiring managers aren't going to talk to each other about issues because they're vying for the same promotions. They can't talk to the people that work with them. You should become the sounding board for your hiring managers. You should become that workplace expert that lets them know what's going on in the job market. If the only time you're talking to your hiring managers is when you have an active rec, that's why they only view you as someone who fills jobs for them. You've got to personalize the experience with your candidates. You've got to personalize the experience with your hiring managers. Position yourself differently. Another area where the elite teams really shine is communication. And I don't just mean to communicate frequently, I mean quality communication. Most candidates drop out of a process because they received a better offer or because they felt ignored or confused, and internally hiring managers become frustrated when they don't feel informed, and they'll point the finger at you when in essence often they're causing the delays. The strongest talent acquisition teams develop repeatable ways to communicate. And I mean, you've got to communicate with always, because I do training for LinkedIn, I have access to a lot of their big data, and they share it with me once a month. We're on calls. And recently they came out with 82% of all email are not open. That's 8 out of 10 email are not open. So if your primary way of communicating with your hiring managers and candidates is email, 8 out of 10 are being ignored. Texting used to be the best way to communicate, often with candidates and hiring managers. But now with all the automated texts that we're getting every day, I don't understand how I'm getting 15 to 20 texts a day that are unsolicited. Like it's starting, I'm sure you're facing the exact same thing I am, where how is this happening? But people will communicate with you if they think you can benefit them. People will not communicate with you if they think you're a waste of their time. When you're ghosted by candidates or you're ghosted by hiring managers, we always point the finger at them. And the poor millennials got blamed for everything. And millennials are now hiring managers, and they're the majority of the workforce. It's interesting because millennials and Gs have taken over the workforce. I mean, they are the majority in the workforce right now, and they are controlling what's going on. And they are much different than the generations before them. Their sense of urgency is right now. They want answers right now. And don't be shocked. We sent somebody in, a high achiever, that we knew we had to fast track. And so, I told the hiring manager, we've got to fast track this woman. She is not going to be on the market long. She got referred to me, and she's actively looking. And so we arranged a panel interview in that. But I said, by the way, when you interview her, she's probably not going to focus on the job you're offering. She's going to ask you where she can go, what advancement, what professional and personal development. And she's going to want to know where she can get to from this job. She's going to view this job as a stepping stone. And so that can't turn you or the panel members off, because she can do this job. And there's a couple things in this job that'll be a stretch for her. See, again, if we present candidates that are doing the exact job, even if it's more money, they leave quickly because candidates want to be stretched. And so you and I have to get very good at how to package transferable skills, because many people are changing industries, they're changing professions, but they've got soft and hard transferable skills. You've got to be able to communicate those, identify them from the candidate and communicate them in an effective way to your hiring managers. Another area where elite teams shine is again, communication and data. Data is another differentiator. You've got to track key data metrics without requiring your team with overwhelming reports. What reports are you really reading, and what metrics do you really need to track? The one metric I've always tracked is how many first interviews do I schedule before someone's hired? Because then I know how many people I have to get on first interviews to hit hiring quotas. Do your people know those numbers? Do you know how many interviews somebody does before someone is actually interviewed by one of your hiring managers? How many interviews are done before you even have a viable candidate? What is your screening process? Top teams analyze reasons for unfilled positions. What about those jobs you had open for 3 months? What is that costing your company? What are those unfilled positions costing your company? And if you've got performance objectives, it makes it very easy for you to go back and get revisions on your job openings. Also, data is something that you should be sharing with your hiring managers every Friday. Now, this may sound extremely cumbersome because I know many of you are balancing a high volume, a high load of jobs. But your hiring managers get frustrated when they don't hear from you. We talked about communication earlier. I'm telling you, the elite organizations give feedback every Friday afternoon. That's just something that I see most of them doing, that every Friday afternoon, they call the direct report. They don't call people involved in the hiring process. They call the direct report and give an update on the open rec and let them know why they're not presenting candidates, that this is what we've run into. This is what we've run into. Is there any chance that we can make a revision? Because this one skill set, and another thing that'll really help you is when you're thinking of data, when you're writing job recs, try to break the job down into percentages. What percentage of the time are they going to do what skill set? Because so often they're asking us for very hard to find skill sets, especially technology jobs. There's an AI element to every tech job right now. And so many of those AI skills have not been mastered by the IT candidates right now because this is a new area, but candidates want to be stretched. They want to learn something. If you want to hire someone who becomes engaged and retained, it has to be a stretch for them. They have to do what they were doing. They've got to bring things to the table that make them valuable to you, but they want to feel stretched. They want to feel like they're learning something, and when you identify bottlenecks, when you identify what's going on and you're sharing it with their direct reports, it's amazing how much they will change the requisition, and now you have a job you can fill. But if you're just getting no feedback and they say it's not a fit, send more candidates, that doesn't help you at all. And you've got to give them what you're finding out there and quantifying. When we're talking to candidates, when we're talking to hiring managers, quantify on a scale of 1 to 10. Because when you ask somebody, are you interested? They're going to say yes. On a scale of 1 to 10, a 4. What would make it a 10? Well, I've got another offer that's closer to home and more money. So probably nothing. When you quantify as you're talking to candidates and your hiring managers, quantifying is a game changer. Performance objectives is a game changer. And also, it helps even the newest talent acquisition person match. Because when you're interviewing a candidate, you want to find out what percentage of the time are you doing what. That helps matching. And more importantly, what percentage of the time do you want to do things in your next job? Because there's always a part of their job they don't like. And what if you're not getting percentages and you got someone that you think is an absolute fit and they hate one part of their current job and it's 10% of their job, and at your company it's going to be 40% of their job, and they're going to start that job and realize that the part of their job they didn't like is the majority of this job, they're going to quit. They're going to quit. And remember, often people quit people, they don't quit a company. There's something going on. That's why if you really want to know why someone's in front of you, if you really want to know why a candidate's talking to you, you've got to ask them the 5 things they change about their current job if they were their boss. That reveals the real reason they're talking to you. When you say, why do you want to change your job? They're going to say, you called me, or I'm just looking for more money. They're not going to give you the real reason. But most people quit a job in today's job market because they don't like their boss. And that's also something important for you to understand, that when you're putting people out there, and if you're worried about turnover, have a stay interview with that candidate and ask them, what is going on? What can we do, to make your job more enjoyable? And so often they say, I just can't stand my boss. And that's another thing. I'm not training on stay interviews today, but if you're not doing stay interviews, most of the elite organizations are no longer doing performance reviews. No one likes performance reviews. Nobody looks forward to them. Everybody dreads them. And to be quite frank with you, the new workforce don't want to be evaluated after 6 months or a year. They want instant feedback. Your quarterly stay reviews will really help engagement and retention. So if that's not something you're doing, that's something the elite organizations. In fact, I can tell you, I trained inside 2 very large companies recently, and 5 years ago was the first time I started working with one of the companies, and they had a tremendous turnover program. And I convinced them like 2 years later to just kick them to the curb and do stay interviews. And their retention and engagement right now is excellent. So I've seen it work at many, many different organizations. And so if a stay interview is not something that you're doing, it's not one of the topics I'm covering today, but I have these squirrel moments every so often. And if I think of something, I want to share them with you. So also, use data to look where problems are occurring, like what stage of your recruiting, hiring, onboarding process are you losing people, and then change that. But also, think about replacing, show your management team why stay interviews are so much more important than performance reviews. Next, let's not forget about the candidate experience. Every interaction a candidate has with you affects your brand. I was on a panel at a CEO conference. It was so funny because, and I'm not going to use the company name, but one of the people, they had ESPN and they had a large pizza company that was on this panel. I was on the panel as well. And the person from the pizza company said that we had to totally change our application process and the way we posted jobs, because what was happening is we weren't giving any feedback. People were applying for jobs, and when they heard nothing, they stopped buying our pizza. And so we were losing customers. And the minute she said that, other people on the panel started sharing the exact same thing. You don't know, and you could not want to hire somebody today, and they could be a future leader in your company. And so everyone that applies with your company. And what I would suggest you all do is call your company at night and pretend you're a job seeker and try to get through. If you wanted to work for your company, try to just see what the messages all say to them. Can you even get to somebody that will talk to them how to apply with your company? Listen to your nighttime voicemail. Apply online. If your online application, some of the job postings, when they're trying to post online, can take 2 to 3 hours to apply for a job online. High achievers are not going to do that. You don't want to hire the 15% of the people that are answering job board ads and are going to your website postings. You want to attract that 85% that are working, might not even be in an active job search. But most people out there, especially in today's workforce, they're keeping their eyes and ears open for an opportunity that would represent advancement for them. And not necessarily even just money. It's good. They want to learn more. They want to, they want to escalate in their career. They might want to go to a different industry. So it's so critically important that you look at your processes, But the candidate experience is not fluff. Every candidate interaction affects your brand, and it affects the perception people have of you. Your company culture is not what is on your website. And that's something else I want you to think about that, again, is not in this training session, but your company culture is different with every one of your departments. And your hiring managers have to understand that. If I'm going to go work in your sales department, I'm going to have a much different experience than if I'm hired in accounting. And so you've got to be honest with people. What is the culture of the environment and the team? The culture is often impacted greatly by the manager of the department, by their direct report. But you want to map the candidate journey because you want to know, that you're corresponding. You don't want to lose anybody. Everybody should have a positive experience with you. Everybody should have a positive experience with you. And so you really have to go back and look at, your experience for the people that you don't hire. Because the people you don't hire, when somebody asks them about their experience applying for a job with you, that word of mouth advertising is priceless. Look at all the money you're spending on all the tools you're using, and everybody you've ever interviewed. And I want you to think about this for a second. Everybody you've ever interviewed and everybody you've ever hired, they're either your army of recruiters or they're being recruited away by your competitors. So look at your internal referral program. It was interesting at the last CEO conference, that's one of my breakouts that I did, was why most internal employee referral programs don't work at all. 40% of your new hires should be referred by your current employees. If that's not your case, you got to go back and learn how to get an effective employee referral program. Because think how much easier your job would be if, in fact, 40% of your hires were referred by your current employees. And think about this: if your current employees love their job, why are they not referring people to you? Because again, all of your employees, how do you like working for this company? What are they saying? Do you even know? Stay interviews help you do that, and never have the direct report do a stay interview. It should be someone that's, a little bit above a peer that should do those, so they're honest. Retention also starts with recruitment. It just does. We often talk about engagement and turnover like they're problems that you and I have to fix post-hire. No. The strongest talent acquisition teams are looking at things like cultural fit, team dynamics, and career progression long before long before an offer is extended. They partner with the internal stakeholders. Your hiring manager should realize your value. You've got to start talking to them when you're not working on an open rec. And I know you're stretched. I know you're stretched. Use AI tools to take some of that redundant work off your desk where you can really show your value. Share what's going on in the job market with them. Ask them what kind of person thrives in their department. Not what's on their resume. How do they think? How do they handle ambiguity? Do their values, align? It was interesting because I had a company recently say that they lost somebody in the C-suite. And it was interesting because they were very critical because this gentleman that they hired was an environmentalist to a fault. I mean, he was very active. And he had environmental associations all over his resume. He even asked them if they would think about, one of their philanthropic endeavors, that he was part of an organization, and they said yes. Well, then after he went to work for them, he discovered that one of the things they were doing was really hurting the environment. And when he brought it up to other people, they go, well, that's just the way it is. This is a monetary decision. We're in business to make a profit. Walked off the job after 5 months, and the hiring for that person took 3 months. Why did that not come out in the interview? So these are just some of the things, and I've tried to throw some extra things in because when you do a call with me, I want to make sure that when you leave a call that I've done, that you feel that this was worth your time. And I don't know what idea I might have said that might resonate with you, but if you leave this call with 1 or 2 good ideas that you implement, there's no power in my training. I tell people that all the time and they always laugh at me. Even when I speak at conferences, I always say there's no power in what I do. It's what do you do with the information that I'm sharing. If you're not following me on LinkedIn, I would suggest you do that because I release my LinkedIn course is free. In fact, I just released a course recently. They let me release a course like every couple of months, and I can release it free. And so if you're following me on LinkedIn, you can get these courses free from me. But I make it a point to attend conferences. I not only speak at 20 conferences a year, I attend conferences. I listen to economists. I don't listen to the news. I really don't. I listen to a few economists that I thrive, that I know are legitimate, but again, you can't do things the same way. What I would like all of you to do is realize that most of you are working on automatic pilot. Think about today. When you woke up this morning and jumped in the shower, you didn't stand there and say, what am I going to wash first? You just took your shower. But if I told you tomorrow, wash yourself backwards, that would take some thinking. I would love all of you to imagine a light switch on your chest. I would love this call to be life-changing for each of you. I want to help you as much as I can. So imagine a light switch on your chest. You just turn it off. And what I would love you to do is I would love you to become very aware of 3 things: the decisions you're making, the actions you're taking, and the results you're getting. If you don't like the results in a certain area of your company or what you're doing, then you can only improve the results by doing one of 2 things: either changing the decisions you're making or change the actions you're taking. And I challenge every one of you on this call, I want you to be uncomfortable at least once a day. Because if you're working and you're never uncomfortable, you're working in your comfort zone, and that's a very limiting place. Do something every day that makes you uncomfortable. And all the things I've told you are things that you can actually implement, and most of them won't cost you a dime. And here's the good news: you don't need a massive budget. You don't need massive teams to do what I've just described. What you do need is a modern playbook, a framework that just helps your team evolve without overwhelming them. Don't try to change too many things. There's many tools out there that can make you more efficient. The strategies exist. The difference between good and great right now is knowing what to prioritize and in what order, because there's almost information overload at times. Today was meant to give you a high level look at what is working for top acquisition teams, top talent acquisition and HR teams. I couldn't go step by step into implementation because honestly, every one of your companies is different. Your goals are different. Your challenges are different. Your hiring managers are different. Your tech stack is different. Your experience is different. And that's why I also want to mention one thing before I get off, and that's where we have something that we offer that can help you. We have a talent acquisition tutor, or I do customized webinar series. I'm just doing one right now for a Fortune 100 company where they have a specific problem, and I'm doing 3 webinars to just turn it around. And so all I would suggest, and it won't cost you a dime, is for you to just set up a call and talk to one of our experts. I hope you're leaving today with a new perspective on how you can lead and not just support the growth of your organization. I hope that that's already happened, but I would love to have you schedule a call with our VP, Jody. She has worked for me for over 20 years. That's why I'm giving you her as your resource. She will answer questions for you. She will see exactly what, if our tutor fits your needs, maybe it won't. We could be your solution, we might not. Webinars might be a solution. We might suggest you do something totally different because we're not the right solution for everybody. You can call at that line and go through to her. You can scan the QR code to set up an appointment on our Calendly calendar. But I can tell you, the 15 or 30 minutes you spend with Jody will be worth your time, because whatever challenge you give her, she's going to give you information that's going to help you whether you invest in anything we do or not. And so I would really strongly suggest that you consider just talking to us, because we work with teams all the time. And again, you can't control the economy, neither can I. You can't control candidates. We can't control hiring managers. You can control how your team performs and how prepared you are for what's next. And I make it my point. That's why I go to so many conferences. That's why I'm on those big data calls for LinkedIn. That's why I'm still doing training for LinkedIn Learning, because I want access to all that data so that I can help you. And I am telling you that regardless of what everybody's saying, companies are still doing well in 2025. I know there's a lot of craziness out there right now, but it's still hard to find talent. And guess who can find talent? What you do is what helps your company achieve the goals. You are the heart of your company. You are so important, and I want you to position yourself where you do get a seat at that table. So again, I hope you benefited by this call. I don't try to sell it all when I'm doing my training, but at the end, I know I can help most organizations that I talk to, and I've trained some outstanding organizations, and they've always gotten improved results. I would love to give you those same results. And if not, if you want to implement some of these ideas yourself, I love that you got the idea. Please share your success stories on my LinkedIn feed. I'd love to hear what idea worked, or if you want to talk to me direct, if you call that number on that screen and you want to have a conversation with me direct, I have no problem doing that. So I really appreciate that you've been here today. I really appreciate all of you, and I really appreciate who you are. Also, if you ever want to get me in front of an event that you go to because you think that I can help you, I would love to do that. I love to get in front of executives and tell them how important you are. So if you ever want me to do that on your behalf, I would love to do that as well. Have a great day, everybody, and thanks for joining me, and let's have a wonderful year, all of us. Thanks, everybody. Bye.